Shame on, and I thought to myself, shame on me for being miserable because, I had reached the success margin. And the other thing is, I wasn't really contributing to society. So when I got laid off, so that's part of the CV that you don't really hear about. Like my CV is more like this, but of course, we make it just look like a straight shot up. I decided to do research on people that I admire. So folks who were in STEM, who were high achieving. But even when I heard those stories, even at the top of the top, in terms of Black intellectual STEM success, you were still hearing these narratives about, there's no dichotomy between equity and excellence and so on. So even though I've been tasked to talk about the future, I really think that we need to go back into the past just for a second. So first I want to argue this is not that far in the past. Like it is not. Like slavery is not that far in the past, and the residue is certainly still with us today. So what you will see here are when the first STEM university courses were taught in mathematics, engineering, science, and computer science. And as you can see, these courses were taught when our people were enslaved. We were suffering the Black codes, Jim Crow, hadn't even reached the civil rights movement, which there's been, continued dismantling of some of the policies and practices that the civil rights movement afforded us. However, even though these courses were designed and founded during a time of gross legalized oppression, somehow these STEM courses still get positioned as innocent, neutral, objective, non-political, while often, like ethnic courses, like cultural psychology, which psychology is a science, but somehow when you put culture in front of it, it like doesn't get that same kind of play. They get positioned as being highly subjective and highly political, and they're even called like passion courses, but not STEM. STEM gets to, have this facade, but we really need to excavate the fact that STEM is racist, white supremacist, it is biased, it's very political, right? And when we see who were the folks that we celebrated, not we, because we know better, but in our society, who do we celebrate? Old white men, right? And even though Asian Americans are overrepresented, they don't even get to this kind of pinnacle of what we consider traditional STEM success. And if you say, well, I'm looking at this timeline, half of these people are dead now, this is not really relevant to today's time. Well, I want to argue that, all right, this is the view of who's won a Nobel Bachelorette in Science, right? These are the Nobel Prize winners. So it is painfully obvious that they are no Nobel Prize winners for medicine, physiology, physics, chemistry, no Black laureates in their 62-year history. So we can now tie that racist, white supremacists, even Nazis were teaching STEM classes. Like eugenicists found statistics. Like, we just can't escape that. We can't escape these things and just pretend that somehow it's neutral. And controversially so, I argue that traditional STEM courses are courses in white studies. So if we can say that African American history is a course in Black studies, we can say that these courses are courses in white studies. And we certainly need to change that, right? I'm saying that because from the curriculum, from the root to the leaf, it is embedded in whiteness, white supremacy, racist ideology, racist logic. So the curriculum needs to change. It's not just about who teaches the curriculum. So even if you have proud, authentic Black bodies in front of your classroom, teaching about Pearson, teaching about Fisher, and they're not talking about their eugenics that they founded the eugenics movement, that's a bad class. That's what I'm trying to argue, that these things are important to the narrative of STEM. And this is the reason why our STEM is so effed up right now, right? Founded for militarism, founded on the ideals, principles, and ideologies of white male slave holders, right? Not just white males, right? White, rich slaveholders who wanted to continue their dominance and their power, right? This is the foundation of STEM. So we certainly cannot ignore this. So let's just move a little bit into the future. This is my girlfriend, Mae Jemison. She's not really my girlfriend, but she's my girlfriend in my mind because I talk to her all the time. She's from the South Side of Chicago, so I really resonate with her. I followed her, and I just think she's freaking awesome and really deserves many more accolades than she has. But one of the things that I love about her is she has like the best quotes. Do like Mae Jemison in powerful quotes, like you'll see a ton of them. But the one I want to present today is the future didn't just happen, it was created. So way before George Floyd, happened, I know that our community has been thinking about racial activism. I know this just did not happen with the George Floyd murder. We've been talking about this. I started writing about this back in 2016, but I realized that there was a tension between wanting to be a racial activist and going into traditional STEM, and the way out of that tension was entrepreneurship. So that's the direction my research has been taking. And I want to show you some really, really exciting findings. So this is a GEM cohort. So you guys know about the GEM consortium. So these are graduate students and or alumni, master's, doctoral students, or alumni. So master's degree holders and PhD degree holders. And in my surveys, what I try to do is just not measure success the way it's traditionally measured, that doesn't take into account psychosocial. Like if you're successful and you're getting awards, but you're being hospitalized for exhaustion, that's not success. Like we really got to expand the definition of success. If you're successful, but you die of John Henryism, meaning you work yourself to death, that's not success, right? That is not success. So I measure things like general health, mental health. Are you okay? Are you well? And I've also put in my surveys for the past 3 years now, racial activism. But more recently, I've been wanting to know about entrepreneurship. All right, here's my first finding, that Blacks are much more likely, statistically significantly more likely than their Latinx counterparts to want to do a startup or become a business owner, right? So that's exciting that they're drawn more to entrepreneurship. And what's a kind of a mixed bag is that that Black participants are more racially active, but they also experience more race-based stress. And my assumption based on my qualitative data is that they experience stress. They don't just wallow. We don't just wallow in our stress, but the stress is real. And our way of coping, possibly healing, is to become more racially active. So to become part of the larger narrative for equity, structural inclusion, structural diversity, not just regular, like plain old diversity, because being at the table, but getting a menu that's already been populated by somebody else is not, ideal. The third finding is that these two factors are the drivers of entrepreneurship, right? So the stress of being Black in STEM, right? And our activation of what we're going to do about it spurs entrepreneurship. And I was talking to my colleague and mentor, Dr. Jeffrey Robinson at Rutgers, and he's saying that these findings are very novel. So no one in the entrepreneurship space is talking about racial activism being a mechanism for entrepreneurship, right? So the entrepreneurship is partly explained because of racial activism, right? So when the question was posed, how do we balance our racial activism and our STEM? I'm saying it's like this, right? And you don't have to balance it. It is actually creating a passion for entrepreneurship. And we need to continue to keep those things interconnected and not have to play which side do you want to be on. And it's not like in my motto, equity ethic, it's not like folks do STEM and then they run a community center. No, folks do STEM in the community to better the community. So it's a marriage of the two. And check this out, you know, as a HBCU alum, and many are probably on this Zoom today, I am excited to report that our research is leaning towards significant, that if you attended an HBCU, and more generally an MSI, because our Latinx participants, you are more likely to express interest in pursuing entrepreneurship. So we knew HBCUs have great benefits in terms of one's physical and mental health. Like 20 years later, they tested it, like we're physically better, but we're also more likely to see Black business owners, to have faculty tell us that we can create and we can innovate, right? And we take that with us even when we transfer to our PWI. So I'm really, really excited about these findings. And lastly, I want to say, I hope I'm not out of time, in terms of engaging young people, because I know, look, the pipes are busted. They're not leaking, y'all. They're just straight busted. And if a plumber, if your pipes were leaking, like the stem pipes were leaking, like 2/3 of stemmers leak out of those pipes, the plumber would have to rip out the pipes. We can't patch that. That ain't no patch job. So we have to look at really new and novel ways of thinking about how to engage young people in STEM. And I'm saying that Afrofuturism should be it. I'm all down, and like way, way before Black Panther, even though I'm glad that was a thing, because before then, you never saw a Black family in the future. Like you would see a Black man or a Black woman, but never a Black family. So I was excited about the Black Panther. But I also want to let you know the awesome Dr. Nelson, who is working for the White House right now. She was the first person to bring Afrofuturism, which is like a combination of sci-fi and creativity and music, Sun Ra, Funkadelics, you know, like all of those genres together, and to say that we can actually teach this in science and mathematics classrooms and in engineering classrooms, right? We can use our, oh, okay, so I see Carlotta is, okay. So I just want to end by saying that people want to put us here, but we are actually much more like this, right? And folks need to start embracing not just the traditional ways in which we do STEM, but that we are moving STEM to the next level. And y'all just need to get out the way and let us do things like find the find the cure for cancer. Everybody can use that. I need to be in my flying car. It should have been happened, you know. And I don't want white people just telling us that they're going to colonize Mars and we're not part of that game. I could say a whole lot more, y'all. You see, I'm so excited. I'm going to put my website up so you can have it. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop share and turn it over to my colleagues.
Ooh, that was a word. I am so upset that I didn't give you an hour. Honey, Dr. Freeman, you've got quite a show to follow up. Let me introduce our next speaker. Dr. Sydney Freeman Jr. is a full professor in the College of Health and Human Services at the University of Idaho. Dr. Freeman is the first African-American male to earn the rank of professor at the UI and rose to the ranks in 5 years and 7 months. He is an international authority on such topics as higher education, leadership, faculty career development, and combating anti-Blackness in the academy. I will stop there and give Dr. Freeman time to speak, and I will also paste his website into the chat so that you can read his full bio. Welcome, Dr. Freeman.
White colleges and universities were not made with Black people in mind. White colleges and universities were not made with Black people in mind. White colleges and universities were not made with Black people in mind. Black professors struggle at white-led and operated institutions around the world. For instance, according to BBC, only 155 out of more than 23,000 university professors in the UK are Black. And in the US, according to the US Department of Education, National Center for Education Statistics, only 4% of all full-time faculty are Black, when we make up 14% of the US population. Not only that, but Blacks are also often portrayed as minimally existing or as token sidekicks in futuristic comics or movies, when statistically there are close to as many Black people in the world as there are white. And the white people are the minority race around the world. So it is necessary for us to reshape the narrative. Yes, we do get excited about depictions of us as scientists in movies like The Black Panther and like Octavia Spencer in the new Netflix film Thunder Force. But what would it be like to envision ourselves as faculty into the future? What would the future of the Black professoriate look like in the year 2050, 2075, or the year 3000? In preparing for these brief remarks, I wanted to engage the right lens or framework to help me envision what it would look like to have Black faculty have transformational experiences that would lead to them thriving holistically, mentally, spiritually, socially, and physically. To do that, I chose to draw upon the concept of Afrofuturism that Dr. McGee mentioned, which essentially centers the existence and experiences of Black people into the future. According to Daylan K. English, quote, Afrofuturism allows us to imagine greater justice and a freer expression of Black subjectivity in the future, or in alternative spaces, times, or realities. It also offers speculation about a world within Black people are normative, end quote. Using Afrofuturism as a lens, I will marry it to my model of Black transformation for the sake of envisioning Black faculty in the future. I would like to introduce a 5-step approach to help us think about Black professors in the future. The steps that I propose in this model are: 1, decolonization; 2, abolition; 3, revolution; 4, liberation; and 5, sovereignty. I'll say that again. 1, decolonization; 2, abolition; 3, revolution; 4, liberation; and 5, sovereignty. The first step that I envision Black faculty in the future taking to transform their experiences in higher education is decolonization of their minds. I define decolonization as the holistic process of letting go of colonial practices, values, and culture, adopting and returning back to indigenous ways of knowing and being. In other words, a change of mindset centering African ways of knowing and being. White institutions' ice water is no wetter are colder than HBCUs, or historically Black colleges and universities. Engaging in research that has a direct impact on Black people has no less value than engaging in scholarship that incorporate other racial groups. Decolonizing our minds says that charity starts at home. And if we have a chance to get a Fulbright scholarship to engage in overseas study, to the extent that it makes sense and it relates to our scholarship, we will prioritize opportunities in Africa, South America, and the Caribbean. And as we become senior scholars, we mentor and go to bat for our junior colleagues, postdocs, staff, and students. We will not be jealous, but we will model what African American feminist and racial justice advocate Mary Church Terrell admonished us to do, which is to lift as we climb. The first step was decolonization. The second step is abolition. I define abolition as being willing to fight injustice and dismantle practices, systems, institutions, or power structures. Not only will faculty support their Black colleagues, but they will use their position to change policies that are inherently anti-Black. They will engage in research that is applied, that can impact local communities, but also partner with our Black colleagues across the diaspora to address entrenched challenges facing our communities around the globe. They will teach others, they will teach using both culturally sensitive pedagogy and critically Black pedagogy, decentering traditional Western-centered approaches to instruction. The first step was decolonization. The second step is abolition. And now the third step is revolution. I define revolution as a fundamental change from the status quo that facilitates new ways of knowing, being, and operating. Black faculty will embrace the radical revolution of rest. Rest will be a primary form of resistance. They will center the care of themselves, their family, and the community ahead of institutions that do not love them. And they will leave institutions that do not serve them. The first step was decolonization. The second step was abolition. The third step is revolution. And the fourth step is liberation. To be liberated is to be free from forms of spiritual, psychological, and physical oppression and captivity. Black faculty in the future will be free not only to engage in scholarship that has immediate impact, but is also esoteric. By that, I mean that it may be research that is understood by only a few people or does not necessarily solve a pressing problem. But Black faculty in the future will have the freedom to dream. And these faculty members will be willing to stand up to leaders, Black or white, faculty or administrators, state legislators, or board of trustees members. And these Black faculty members will understand that they are not free until we all are free. The first step was decolonization. The second step was abolition. The third step was revolution. The fourth step was liberation. And the last step is sovereignty. When I say sovereignty, I am stating that Black faculty will be committed to supporting and or establishing Black-owned and operated higher education institutions. Of course, I am advocating for the support of historically Black colleges and universities and predominantly Black institutions with their time, treasures, and talents. But I am also suggesting that Black faculty will ensure that Black spaces are carved out at white institutions. I will close with this example. 2 weeks ago, I was notified that along with being allocated dedicated space for our Black Cultural Center, the president had approved us moving forward with hiring a director of that center. As I was walking across the campus and had gotten that notice, there was like something was downloaded into me that said Hush Harbor. And I had heard that term before, Hush Harbor, but I was trying to struggle to figure out what it was. So I Googled it. And Hush Harbor, what I found out what Hush Harbor meant, and it leaped out of my spirit, was that Hush Harbor was a place, a sacred space, a place set aside, a holy place where our foreparents who were slaves, they went to a section and created a place where they would use coded language and sing coded songs that would strategize and describe the way in which we would be seeking our freedom. And so I'm so excited that in the future, I see us creating spaces of freedom, hush harbors for us to strategize and see ourselves into the future. In closing, the gospel writer Richard Smallwood penned these words: "This world sometimes seems cruel and cold, and pain doth pierce my very soul. But there's a place, a secret place, a place where I can go." So the future of Black scholars in higher education is transformation. And by following the steps of decolonization, abolition, revolution, liberation, and sovereignty, Black faculty in the future will be transformed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Dr. McGee, I am going to bring you back to the main screen now, and we are going to entertain questions. Give me just a minute to get Dr. McGee back on screen, and then please type your questions into the chat. Or I also have some questions that people submitted in advance. Powerful, both of you. I'm over here trying to be a participant and take notes and supposed to be moderating. Woo. So let me look at the chat, get myself together. And if there's nothing there, I am going to ask you some of the questions. And I'm obviously going to do me first because, you know, moderator privilege. So I think I'm going to change my question. And don't be mad. It's nothing that I asked you guys earlier. What do you think about all this critical race theory, mishigosh going on right now? Because, you know, if you look on social media, we got people telling teachers or telling kids and parents, if your teacher says intersectionality or culturally relevant pedagogy, that's critical race theory and you need to report them. How can we as scholars work to educate the broader community about what we need? I know Dr. Freeman's already said it, the future looks like we need our own spaces. And if it doesn't serve you, you need to leave. But what are your thoughts on that? I'll start with Dr. McGee.
So first of all, I just want to say a big shout out to Dr. Freeman. We didn't even talk prior to this, and we both talked about Afrofuturism and so many things that we shared. So Dr. Freeman, I know I'm on the right path, and me and you in solidarity, brother. So I just want to say that. So I taught critical race theory last semester. And I believe that everybody is trying to say that diversity, equity, and inclusion issues of culturally affirming pedagogy are not critical race theory, as if critical race theory is bad. And I just want to say there is nothing wrong with critical race theory. And there's actually nothing wrong with teaching critical race theory in K-12, right? So if you want socially conscious folks who are going to make soap dispensers that acknowledge dark skin, right? We need these critical theories of race. So critical race theory is also just one critical theory of race. There's also structural racism, Bonilla Silver's work on racist without, no, racism without racist. And there's other work on role strain, Philip Bowman. So the critical race theory is just one of the many theories of race. But the reason why it is so important, and that white folks should not be in fear of embracing it, is it actually lets individual white folks, I'm not going to say off the hook. I could just see a critical race theorist slapping me right now, but we really focus on the structure, right? So we talk about the structure of our society. We're not hunting for racists, right? We're not doing that. And many of the books that we've seen lately, like what's that lady, D'Angelo, who has no Black friends, by the way, but you know,
Robin.
Yeah, Robin
yes,
DiAngelo.
Robin DiAngelo, you know, she's hunting for you know, racist white folks. We're not, critical race theory is not talking about that. We are talking about changing the structure. And I often tell my students, you are a ideal byproduct of a racist structure. You know, so these things that you believe, these practices that you practice, these ideologies are a byproduct of the way we've been socialized into a structure. So it actually shouldn't be something that we should fear. But again, we can't really talk about racism without talking about capitalism and talking about power. And no one wants to give up that, right? And maybe
Absolutely.
once we get conscious that some power is either going to have to be given up or shared. And, you know, white folks, they ain't ready for that right now.
Yeah.
Dr. Freeman.
Yeah. Dr. Freeman, thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm at ground zero for this whole conversation on critical race theory. I'm at the University of Idaho, which was, if not the first state, the second state to enact a bill related to banning critical race theory. So we're still trying to figure it out, how we'll navigate this. But I've said this is white people's problems. White people have created this, so white people need to figure out how to deal with it, right? So I'm not getting on the news and trying to defend it and all that. I do what I do. I'm doing what I need to do in my classes. I've alerted my dean and my faculty, you know, the other faculty. This is a part of what I do, and engage the chief diversity officer, all those individuals. But I'm not taking the weight of well, I'm no longer trying to, there's a book by a scholar in Britain that essentially the title of the book is Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Racism, right? So my focus is on Black people, how we can empower Black people, educate Black people, to the extent that white people can listen in and learn. I do that, but there is that fight that's going on, and so I've tried to educate as I can, but I'm leaving that in white people's. White people are good liberals that like to say they're allies or accomplices. There's different terms that people use. Let them take up the fight with their white brothers and sisters.
Absolutely, thank you. We have a very active chat going on. I want to thank Anthony and Jay and Allison for participating, but I want to get some of their questions in. So I believe that Anthony's question came in first. So let me read that one to you, and then Jay, and then I believe it's Allison. So Anthony's question: how can onboarding and research training better support our Black researchers? Second part: how can we prepare white spaces for supporting their future Black colleagues? Would you like me to repeat?
So I think you mean onboarding when someone becomes an assistant tenure track.
It gets hired. I think, yes. Anthony can come off of mute if that's not clear.
I think it's clear. He's really talking about junior faculty and how they're kind of thrown into the mix and just kind of sink or swim mentality. So I actually have a program along with my colleagues, Otis Johnson and Ezekiel Dixon Romaine, to try to advocate for professional development and critical methodologies that focus on STEM faculty, as a matter of fact. So this is because there is so much that's not out there that we decided to create this program, got funding from Spencer, National Science Foundation, and the Deputy Grant. When I finish talking, I'll put the link in the chat. And what we found that there were many STEM faculty who, first of all, wanted to get NSF grants, but particularly wanted to get NSF grants to do work on racial disparities or even racial activism, and weren't getting past the review process. And it wasn't because the idea wasn't brilliant, it was because of the methodology. So how they're going about, the study was the point of contention. So we are trying to teach critical methodologies, like we're trying to teach non-deficit, culturally affirming, racially conscious methodologies for these STEM faculty so they can secure grants and do the work that they need to do. But I'm very aware of the penalty that we get for trying to infuse racial activism or racial inequities in our work, in our scholarship. And then many of our faculty who are white males and sometimes Asian males do not believe that is true STEM research. So I do understand and acknowledge that tension. But if you get a $1 million grant, homie, it's kind of hard to say that that's not research. So that's what we're trying to do. Dr. Freeman?
Yeah, so I'm adding a article that I wrote with Dr. Donna Ford out of Ohio State University, and she was at Vanderbilt before then. But we wrote an article, I think last year or either earlier this year, that's essentially said, Black faculty, please stand up. And what that senior faculty, please stand up. And it's charging our senior Black faculty to do what they can to support the next generation of scholars. And so what I mean by that is not just to accept the way that things are. And so it's really important when we're thinking about onboarding our new junior faculty, postdocs, and graduate students, that we be active participants in grooming that next generation and making it easier. So I've been on committees and I've seen instances or been a part of instances where Black faculty are not challenging the system, not trying to dismantle some of the ways of the traditional ways of evaluation, things like that, and they just go along to get along. And they'll brag that they have tenure, and they can brag that they got through the system. But if you're not helping to make it better for the next generation, then I think you're missing a key opportunity. So my thing would be really to charge those who have faculty that do have tenure, and are moving towards full professor or administration, that they find ways in which to be actively support junior faculty, postdocs, and graduate students.
Thank you. Thank you. We do have our next question from Dr. Nias. We only have 18 minutes left, so I want to make sure to get as many questions in as we can. Dr. Nias, give me 1 second. I am scrolling through the chat. Okay, for tenure track faculty in STEM, how do we find others in community of scholars centering Blackness in their work so that we can get the verifiability required for success in the ivory tower? Even Black peers seem to subvert this work as subpar or non-scientific, fantastical contributions if it doesn't support Eurocentric scientific construct. I think both of our panelists addressed this today, but please feel free to add on.
So this is a really interesting question, and I do understand the dynamics of getting tenure, and everybody's not going to be an upfront, in your face racial activist, and that's okay with me, right? We need you also to be innovators in your field and to be that Black professor that no white students had. But for folks who, I am actually trying to create a list of a framework that I'm calling equity ethic, whereas you are doing STEM not just for one's own satisfaction or to fulfill a job quota, but you are doing STEM with a sense and an understanding of your own racialized experiences, in a sense that Dr. Freeman said, a link faith. Like, I'm not good until my doctoral student is good, right? Mm-hmm. And I did not even celebrate becoming a full professor. Like, Vanderbilt called me out on Twitter and LinkedIn. I wasn't ready because I was straight protesting, not just Hannah Jones, but so many other Black women faculty who haven't got their due. And I too, like Dr. Freeman, am the first, but I bet he will also agree that we shouldn't have been the first. Here we are in 2021, and you couldn't find no other Black woman to become full professor at Peabody College. My institution should be ashamed of itself. Although me and Dr. Freeman are proud, we are proud to, have those achievements, but we certainly shouldn't have been the first. So what I'm trying to do is trying to create a list of equity ethics STEM scholars, like Ayanna Howard, using robotics for cerebral palsy, the president of FAMU, who got his degree in nuclear engineering, but now is doing environmental justice, Manu Platt, who has inner city children work in the summer in his lab. Like, they are so many folks out here. Carlotta, right? I'm still citing your New York Times. They call me Dr. Barry. You see what I'm saying? Right? So there are a lot of us out here, Leroy, I see Leroy on the line, who are doing these kind of things and who are making tenure, getting the grants. And I'm trying to compile that list to show that there is a different side of STEM that's not being publicized, but we're here and we're successful. So when y'all get that email from me, please respond.
Absolutely. Okay, let me go back to the chat. Great. I may have to go get one of the curated questions. I don't see anything else in the chat right now. I think Dr. Clark's talking about critical race theory, but no questions necessarily. But I think, like Dr. Freeman said, that's white people's problem. Sorry, I'm still laughing about that one.
Well, I want to say one thing about that. So
okay.
Stokely Carmichael says, if a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. But if a white man has the power to lynch me, that's my problem, right?
Woo, so that's a word.
Okay, that was from the great Stokely Carmichael, coined the term Black Power, right? So I do worry about the power that white academics, STEM faculty have. I just really want a bunch of them to retire. Like, they're near retirement. And what I say in my talks is, if you're not willing to share your power, which is what we need, we don't need just a seat at the white supremacy STEM table, right? We need you to give up or share your power so we can dismantle STEM, at least on the way out.
Yeah.
Go, but make sure that you hire another Black faculty member, right?
Right.
So, that power thing, I don't know if we can get away with just being all Black all the time, which I love to do, without addressing the issue of power. But Dr. Chris, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I did want to answer that previous question about, how do we address our work related to our culture in our research. So in my tenure process, I ended up having to do a formal response because whoever the evaluators were, they didn't appreciate it, right? And so I had to explain it. I had to explain why I chose the outlets that I chose and those kinds of things. So for those who may be going up or need language around that, I had other senior Black scholars that poured into me and said, this is how you handle it. Don't worry about it. This is how don't be defensive. Don't be assertive about what you're doing. It aligns with, what you do and all that stuff. So if you need that kind of language, I think senior scholars, that's a part of a theme of what I'm trying to say. For us, it's important for us to help while we're on these committees, but also coach, mentor, and sponsor the next generation.
Okay, awesome. Next question. I am doing double duty, so when I pause, I don't want you guys to think I'm not listening. I'm just also tweeting out some of our takeaways and trying to answer questions. But here's our next one coming in. Here, and it's kind of built on what you said about Black senior faculty and scholars. This one's from Hoover. What are the best ways that we can set examples and encourage emerging Black scholars who are constantly discouraged by the current experiences of Black scholars in academia? I struggle with this one as well, because we need them. We need a critical mass. We can't get these changes until we build our own spaces. As Dr. Freeman said, we have to recruit, but then it's like, man, I'm asking you to come join me in a place that wasn't built for you. Right. So how do we balance those two?
This is an excellent question, particularly because my writing has a constant critique of what it means to be a Black faculty member. You know, particularly in the stepchild of STEM, because that's like engineering education, like that's over there, right? So I have an even different narrative than some of my STEM faculty. Mm-hmm. But God damn, dog it, this is the best job I ever had. I'm in the summer in Chicago, but I'm still making summer salary because I got grants. I think we really need to show a more balanced perspective of what a faculty member is. Like, I became a faculty member because I wanted to have the ability to pick my son up at 3 p.m. from high school, like no matter what. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't do that at a job. Okay, so yeah, that meant after he went to sleep at 9:30, I had to work for a couple of more hours. But this is a really great lifestyle. I'm going to retire as a faculty member. Like, this is so much better than industry for me. I'm able to kind of be like a micro entrepreneur is what I call myself, because Vanderbilt's still taking 58% of my grants. Like, that's another whole story, right? But, you know, with that money, I'm able to do certain things. I can hire folks. Like, I love this job. I love it. But I mean, I got a hell of a critique, and I know my experience may not be the same as other folks' experience as well. But I think we really need to do a better job, and we need to share our salaries. Now, I know this is controversial, but, you know, if we share our salaries, you know, people think that I interview doctoral students like for a living, and they think I'm broke. And I'm like, I'm actually doing okay, you know? So I think we need to kind of, you know, come real with some of the pains and strains, but also some of the joys and pleasures.
So I would just second what she said. I feel like particularly, so I'll talk about Black men. So one of the things that it has been my experience, and I've written on this, Black women have been more nurturing and more forthright about supporting me and my process. Don't get me wrong, I had Black male scholars that were supportive, but I think that Black male senior scholars need to step up in a particular way regarding supporting the next generation. So, and being honest about their experiences, and you know, and it doesn't just need to be. And I've seen this and heard this, and this comes out of some of my research, that unless the Black male who's a senior scholar can get something out of the situation, right, there's not the kind of mentoring that should be there. Not just saying that this is another brother, another sister that's trying to you know, to move up. It's kind of like if they don't reflect good on me or whatever, it's those kinds of politics, rather than saying, I'm going to pour into our community. I have a passion, and I feel it's a strategic duty to do that. So I would say that that's important too.
Thank you. Let me check the chat and see any more questions coming in. Yeah, that salary one is hard. It's hard. I worked at a state school before I was at a HBCU, so I didn't have a choice. It was out there and good, but I don't know. I'm not a private university, and I don't know if I want to release my salary, because I might get hot when I find out I'm not making what everybody else is making. But I do understand what you're saying. Our students do think we're broke. I will say, though, that most of my students at Rose-Hulman graduate making more than I do. And maybe because I'm into science, engineering, and math school, but yeah, my students are making more than the faculty. Some of them are going into jobs at 100K, but I think it's just the field that they're in. So Dr. Starbird said, knowing salaries allowed me and others this year to ask for what we are really worth in faculty and industry positions. We would have accepted so much less if we had not. So let me look at one of our other questions. Someone said, how can the benefits and essence of mentorship in Black communities be promoted? So we all know that Black people do a lot of invisible labor, and a lot of times it's because we put that on ourselves. But how can that be promoted and amplified? I also like to tell people all the time, although they say the 3 tenets are teaching, research, and service, service feels like a throwaway a lot of times, although we know women and Black people do more of that. So how can we talk about the benefits and essence in the Black community and promote that?
Boy, that's a tough question. That's a tough question for me, because when I was doing K-12 work and I was bringing in the benefit of bid whist and dominoes and dice and those kind of mathematical cultural affirmations that we have in the home that are not seamlessly seen as math achievements in the school, I got some backlash about stereotyping, right? So how do you bring in the richest of our community? The fact is math is done in households every weekend when it's time for bid whist, and that not being seen as stereotyping, in academic places or spaces. So Afrofuturism is one of the ways that we can do that, but maybe Dr. Freeman can provide some more guidance.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking about my research where Black, in particular, Black male faculty had challenges with mentoring because they're being pulled in so many directions. And I think that of course you have to be clear about your responsibilities at the institution, but be willing to be vulnerable with some of your particularly your Black students about, here's the things that I'm navigating now as a professor. Here are those. So being very intentional, I guess what I'm saying is being very intentional about mentoring, not leaving it to the aside, but integrating it into what you're doing. And so it doesn't feel like this kind of aside thing that becomes a burden. It's integrated in what you do. So I give you an example. One of the things that I did, I wasn't I forgot what you call sponsor of the Black culture. The Black Student Union, but I was doing a research project on Blacks at our institutions, and I asked him to be I asked the president of the Black Student Union to be a part of that and paid him a little money, all that kind of stuff. And so I integrated him into the work that we were doing. So finding strategic ways in which to make it intentional versus it feeling like an extra burden on you is a strategy that should be considered.
Wonderful. We have about 3 minutes left, so I want to give each of you space to give your closing thoughts on this topic or promote something new, whatever you like. I know Dr. McGee was talking about she needs some survey respondents. So whatever you guys want to promote for the last 3 minutes, the floor is yours. I will let Dr. McGee go first.
Yeah, I think lastly, I just want to say that I started off with my dissertation doing work on resilience. So I thought resilience and what we now call grit was the key to having marginalized folks of color become successful in STEM. I now know that strictly internal lies, resilience and grit can kill you, right? And what I mean by that is it's a premature death. That if we don't have external support systems, that is really just oppression. So when you see someone asking you to be resilient and to be gritty against 400 years of structuralized oppression, they're just telling you to exist and try to thrive within your oppression. So I just want to let everyone know that it's important that you take care of your full self, right? You have an academic identity, but also hopefully you have a personal identity. I've seen a couple of my faculty members at Vanderbilt die, Black men in particular. They did an hour Zoom, memorial, and then Vanderbilt went about his business, right? So don't give these institutions your everything, because when you die, your position will be on the website a week later, right? So just please take care of your full selves and understand that resilience and grit is not a do-it-yourself endeavor. We need external supports.
Be encouraged, be encouraged, be encouraged. I say that because many of us have had a tough year that we just came out of. And there was a study that came out recently that said Black people, essentially more than 80% of us do not want to go back into our workplaces, right? And so we're being forced, in many cases, we're feeling like we're being forced into hostile places. And so in my talk there, I talked about rest as revolution, as resistance. I would encourage you to do that, but just be encouraged. I also say that because this has probably been one of the most fun spaces, one of the spaces where we can be around each other. Many of us are at predominantly white institutions where we're not affirmed, and to be in a space where Black excellence is affirmed is refreshing. So take all of this in, connect with different people. I'm connecting with 2 or 3 people after this meeting, after this session. Get up with people, and I'm hoping that you take care of yourselves as you're going into the next semester.
Woo! Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McGee, on vacation in Chicago coming through. Thank you, Dr. Freeman, who I met during the pandemic at another panel. And I am so glad to finally get to know you. The 2 of you have been a blessing. I hope you will come back if we do this conference again, because y'all needed more time. I cheated you. Woo, Lord.
If.
You see, I just posted, this is the HBCU of conferences, of STEM conferences right here. This is our homecoming. That's why we call it our homecoming. Thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough. Thank you, Du Bois, our captioner. I'm sorry, our ASL interpreter. Thank you, our captioner. I don't think I know their name, but you've been a blessing. Hopefully you guys will come back this afternoon for the keynote with Dr. Corbett. There's also afternoon sessions starting at 1 o'clock. I will see you then. If you want to continue the conversation, you have their Twitter handles, you have their websites, or you can connect with them on Whova. Have a great afternoon.